Hey everyone, I'm Adam McMinnon, and we are just about a month away from taking you through what I hope is one of the most interactive sessions you can go through, that you can take some of the theory and put it right into practice in the application of it, what you do each and every day. So what I want to talk through today is just what are the topics that we're going to get involved with, and then what are the things that you can start to think about now to help you get set up for the session at your conference. So what we're calling this session is all around how do you navigate the talent landscape. And there's two particular ways that we're going to come out with this. I'll share with you in a second a little bit about my background. Is again, my name's Adam Hickman. I've been 22 years in the space of some sort of organizational development role, whether it be at the front line or the middle or your executive or even CEO at succession planning and coaching as well. I've done that as what I would call my practitioner work. And then scholar-wise, I've published a little bit over 90 publications. There's one still yet to come out, hasn't come out yet, about the 4-day work week. If you got interest in that, we should talk. And since then, I've continued down that path of not only being able to understand what's the theory of what it is that we're doing, but then how do you in turn put that into practice? Because that's really where you see the difference. And so our time together is going to really stick with two areas. It's pretty easy to pull together what this is. It's the what, which is how do you define the talent strategy through questions, through things we should address, or what's the biggest lift to understanding, do we have the right talent strategy in this organization or not? And you add the how piece to it, which is how do we guide people to identify what are the initiatives or the imperatives or our results that we're after. It's really down to what's the objective that we're trying to do. Oftentimes we get really clear on what the what is, and you completely miss the how part, which is the practical application. So before you leave this session, I'm going to promise you that we're going to spend time interacting at your tables and groups, back and forth between you and I around what do we do, what questions do we ask, because we're going to dive into a couple different sections. So the first part, let's say at the very beginning, how do I know I've got a talent strategy, or how do I know what I would consider is how do you know your organization's a talent magnet? Meaning you've got things established that when somebody's searching for a company to join or organization to join, you really just attract them like a magnet based on what you say and what you do. The first step of that is really establishing what's an employee value proposition. So maybe you have one today, which would be great. Bring it with you to the session. If you don't have one, that's all right. Ideally, what we're going to do is spend time in these areas. Let's talk through what these are. I mean, you can see the circle here and how it's cut between connections and partnerships. And what that is specifically is how do employees feel understood by helping them be themselves? Maybe you've heard terms like psychological safety or things of that sort, but that's just the what. The how piece is how do I really understand and validate, not subjectively, but objectively, that we've done this in a way in which we can prove. The flexibility and accountability, everybody wants flexibility these days. Right? The more I read about Gen Zs and millennials, they're still a thing. We still have to work with them. They're still in the workforce. Is that the conversation stops with autonomy. Everybody wants the flexibility of work and where and when, but that only works well as if you have the accountability to follow it. So again, I'll share some of the questions that we evaluate on how do we do this in a way that we understand our relationship with our candidates in terms what are they expecting, but how do we say that to you without us interacting? That's done through your EVP statement. And we're going to work through what that is. Personal growth. We all know personal growth is all about feeling valued by providing people with personal development opportunities. Here's the difference this. I think a myth in organizations today is that we make the assumption we know best without a conversation with who the person is. Does say personal growth, which means you have to involve the other person. Maybe you find out that your IDP, your individual development plan, is set up in a way for that person now, but did you think through what's the future look for them? Because we all know and would love to perceive that we can figure out best what's for the team. But without the person on the other side being able to do this, you're missing that opportunity to say, talk to me about the next 5 years. What are you thinking there? What about 10? I'll share with you. I was in a conversation this morning with someone. They're on my team. They're in more of a SharePoint IT type of role. And I've tapped out. I said, you know, IT is not my space. HR, I can help you with just about anything under the sun with this. I can't on IT because that's not my credibility. I have no credibility there. So I involved our CIO to say, hear me out. Just listen to what you hear on this call with this person. And we're going to talk about their development plan. What's going to come of that is we're going to move that person over to the IT world because I, the manager, have said I can no longer personal develop this person. I can in the work that we have, but based on their personal growth, it's not me. And that's A-okay because we've retained the talent, but just think in terms of engagement, we just added longevity to their career here because we're okay with understanding what personal growth means. And sometimes that might mean that that's not on your team, that it needs to go somewhere else. So we'll get into how do we do that. The holistic well-being is all around feeling cared and providing about a complete set of well-being offerings. Underneath well-being, there's a lot that we'll talk through. It's not just a one object. There's things like personal, career, community, physical. Maybe you've read things about resilience and mental health. Yes, that's a part of what this is. And it's not just having a holistic well-being approach, but do your frontline managers, middle managers know what it is well enough to where they're not the psychologist in their role, but they're more of the conduit to where do I go find these programs that we have access to and knowing when to spot when it's time to tap out for that. The shared purpose is all around feeling invested by taking actions on the cultural issues that you found. Ideally, we've got a way that you can measure what your culture is, because when you do this, it's that definition to the left here, which is that emotional response to a set of attributes. The attributes are the behaviors that your people are doing because that's how they perceive work. In the shortest form possible, you're answering this question. What do you come to work to do every single day and how do I get to it? Those are the things that we're aiming at within this session that an EVP statement will start to formulate for you to say at our place of business, our employee value proposition, what we're selling to you before you come here is this, and it encompasses these pieces. Like I said, if you've got one, bring it to the session. We'll use our material more as a rubric for you to go through and say, do we have all the pieces that we need? And if you need to add some, great. It's the perfect time for us to network and figure out what we can add. If you don't have one just yet, that's all right as well. Hopefully we can construct what this is before we leave this session. Okay, the other part that we're going to pivot and talk through really stems from what's the recent data show. So seeing this number that 23% HR leaders are saying and feeling confident that their organization has the rising leaders who can meet their future needs. To me, the scarier number is the inverse to this. So 23%, what are the other ones doing? But here in the sentence is where I start to dig into, meaning a feeling confident is an informed opinion. So we've got communication breakdown. Rising leaders means we've got a hypo program involved. And then future needs means that we've identified what those needs are. And you've got a roadmap more or less on how to get there. So pull this all together. If HR leaders are unsure about it, and we're on the supportive side, then how are your operations leaders doing anything with this or knowing how to support? So I put this up here not as a way to scare the reality of what things are, but it's more of the awakening on there are things you have to start to get ahead of right now to get to 2030 or to get to 2050 that we'll get into in this session. And it starts with these 5. To take a look at the most recent data on, well, what are the trending items that get us to 2030? It's these 5. These 5 are the areas that I would say are researched the most in terms of leading organizations from an HR standpoint, but then also the futuristic side of things that are coming in that we didn't plan for. I don't think anyone planned for ChatGPT or generative AI to be as prominent as it is, but it's here. So to have a lack of awareness or willingness to at least scope out what's possible, I think is a complete miss. The comment I've heard recently has been AI won't replace employees, but employees that do not use AI will be replaced by AI, which I think is absolutely true. It's all about prompts and how you use those for what it is that we need to do. And I'm sure you're experiencing the same. So in stack order here of what's most applicable for us to spend their time, I'm going to narrow this to just one, which is the urgency on leader and manager capability. And I'm going to say capability and talent. I'll show you the talent piece here in a second, but it's more, do you have innate leaders in your organization? And how are you going to find that? Well, the best part to this, it's all through questions. You don't need AI for this. You just need to know who are your best in your business. And with a set of questions we're going to talk you through, I'll help you to understand where the most talented are and why it's most important. I'm going to ask this question again in our session. So if you're watching this, you're going to get a little preview. But the question is going to be, what's the most important decision you make as a leader? When I ask this, and I'll tell you the answer here in a minute, but when I ask this, I usually hear things like budget, decisions, profit margin, all of the things you would expect to hear, but we missed one, and it's who you hire. That is your one time to add talent to your team, to your organization, to your culture. And if you get it wrong, the risk of it is 30% of their first year salary is the benchmark number that I use consistently to say that's the cost of a bad hire. So pick out an employee of yours, do 30% of their salary. If that was a bad hire, ideally that's what you lost on the front part to go get them, retain them, bring them in, train them up, and so on and so forth. So how do you fix that and identify the current talent in your organization? Well, you've got to flip the whole model of how you think of a typical approach to hiring upside down. Here's how I know that. Your typical approach looks like this. Things that are trainable, education, experience, skills, knowledge, that's undisputed. That's on a resume. You'll hear it. You'll hear in conversations with them. Tell me about, this, or talk about this. You'll hear all those pieces. That's trainable. The not trainable piece on it is how do they fit your team and how do they fit to you as the manager themselves. It's your typical approach to how we hire. I'm going to add another complexity to it, which is we miss the part around unique, which is unique to the talent in itself. Let me give you an example. Talent falls out of everybody's mouth every day. You just got to listen for it. Here's how I know. Of that talent, I'm going to talk through 5 specific domains that are within this talent wheel here for helping you to understand who are the best in your organization and the most talented, because now that's the add-on to this. But then when we're out interviewing or when you're sourcing or building a pipeline, you have a good way to measure, do I have a talented person? Meaning, do I have a manager or a leader that woke up today with the desire to coach and develop every single day? And by these 5, let me give you one of these to start to think through. Think of a person that that you would say has been the most successful leader that you know today. And what motivates that person to pursue, accomplish, or complete tasks? That's their drive. The drive is one of the 5. When you really can understand the talent domain of drive, you're understanding how does someone get work done, how do they accomplish it, how do they pursue it, how do they set up for it. And when you've asked specific questions that we'll build in this session, you'll be able to go ask your best and most talented that's in your organization to hear the behavior that they're describing. Because what's unique to them is their behavior, how they do it. Now, at an aggregate level, when you have enough of that in your database to know that, then you ought to know within certain pockets of the organization, when I ask these questions, the way that I'm going to know if I've got a talented leader is they're going to say something in the realm of what our most talented have answered before. Let's do one more. Think of the same person. How do they approach information processing, problem solving, or decision making effectively? That's their decision making skill. It's the same thing. It's not just about the outcome of it, but the behavior that got them there. You'll start to hear this over and over and over to the point where you can ask a specific question and sort the answer the fastest on, are they talented or not? And there's no right or wrong answer. They're just your answer in an interview. It's but what are we listening for to know, are they the most talented or not? The reason why all this matters is that if you use engagement as your #1 predictor to performance, you're in the right area. Because often engagement is that squishy number or metric that not a lot of leaders want to talk about, right? It's a soft number. It doesn't have much prediction to anything more than knowing if people are happy or not. And I'll tell you, the most engaged are happy. But what you're missing is engagement is your number one predictor to performance. It's also your most competitive edge that you have. Think of the most successful company that you've worked with. Their employees were engaged, and that wasn't by mistake. That was either tactful or they had the most talented managers walking around there coaching and developing every day. And when you get to a point where you flipped from the typical approach more to a talent-based approach, you've completely turned the hiring upside down to the point where you now have just talent and all-stars walking around your organization every day. And remember, when you do that, you've increased their engagement. You increase their engagement, here comes the performance. So again, I look forward to working with you and partnering you here in the future, and we'll see you just here in short of a month. Hi, everyone. I am Adam Hickman, and I am excited to spend time with you this May at the HR Summit and Expo. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is talent management strategies and how do we align talent with the work that we have. The reason being is that globally, 53% of HR leaders know and say that the landscape for competition and talent in the workplace is going to continue to grow. The scarier part to that number that we'll talk through is 51% of employees globally are actively seeking a role. So think of two people, one's looking for a role. Why is that? Well, it all depends upon your talent management strategy and how that's set up. So what I'm looking forward to is the insights that I can bring to you to work through what's your current talent management strategy. If you've got one, great, bring it. We're gonna look through it. We're gonna define what we mean by talent. You hear talent all over the place, and I'm gonna put some quick words to how I think you can walk around and just talk about talent in a different way. How do you drive to the talent imperatives that you have within your organization? Do you have conscious efforts aimed at growing your talent, finding new talent? Lastly, how do we make sure this is a priority for your organization? So I can't wait to see you and partner with you on this and look to talk soon.
What if you and your team can be even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more. Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan O'Donnell. I'm the conference director at Informa Connect Middle East. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of talking with Sam Silverstein, who is the founder and CEO of the Accountability Institute and the creator of the Certified Accountability Advisor designation. Throughout his career, Sam has helped organizations' leaders to assess their engagement and accountability. So welcome, Sam. We're absolutely delighted to have you join us today. And I know what we're going to be talking about is really just going to scratch the surface of the Accountability Advantage program that we'll experience more of in Riyadh later in May. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to having this conversation and getting people to have an insight into what we're going to go very deep in when we're in Riyadh in May.
Excellent. Yeah, like I said, we're really excited to have you. So as we get started here, should we just sort of set the foundation and really talk about why accountability is important? And is there a connection to the company's bottom line?
Well, those are great questions. And here's what we've discovered with over 30 years worth of research into accountability, workplace culture, and how that drives the highest form of leadership. And that is that accountability definitely connects to the bottom line, without a doubt. And accountability is what's going to help you create a workplace environment that always attracts and retains the best people. The other thing that we've discovered is that accountability is not something that's mandated. It's something that's encouraged, that's inspired in the culture. Accountability is actually a derivative, an outflow of a high performance, positive, values-based, people-based workplace culture. So our goal with the Accountability Advantage is to help leaders really understand what accountability is and shift their thinking from a transactional, tactical topic to a relational one.
Great. So you've talked about being accountability or being accountable and how that can help attract and retain the best people. But how does that then, I guess, help create a high performance environment that can drive further success in the organization?
So here's what we know to be true, that many times leaders see accountability as really a tactical subject. In other words, I take the position that everything that we've been taught about accountability is wrong. Accountability is not a way of doing, it's a way of thinking. It's how we think about people. Accountability isn't leadership trying to manipulate people to do more for them. Accountability is leadership, first and foremost, stepping up and accepting the responsibility that they are accountable to their people, they are accountable for their people, and that they are responsible to create a workplace environment that inspires people to choose to be accountable and to choose to be their best. So we define accountability as keeping your commitments to people, but we delineate between tactical commitments and relational commitments. Now, commitments, no matter what, it's absolute. But that sales report that's due on Friday, the financial statements that need to be prepared by next Wednesday, those are things. We're responsible for things. We're accountable to people. So accountability is always going to lie between people. And when leadership starts understanding that when they say, I'm going to hold you accountable, it's like putting a gun to someone's head. Rather, people want help being accountable because they want to work with and for leaders who've accepted that they are accountable for their people and accountable to their people. It's a whole different mindset. It's a different way of seeing your people. When you see your people differently, you treat them differently, you commit to them differently, and you get a different result. That's what we go deep into in the Accountability Advantage.
That's great. So there's clear advantages. There's clear opportunities by creating a high performance environment. What are some of the challenges that you see that's come out of your research over the last, I think you said 30 years, that prevent organizations from being accountable?
So we find that there's a lot of leaders that they're focused on the bottom line and they're not focused on their people. Now, we do need to perform. Don't get me wrong. We want to perform at the highest possible level. But if a leader is focused on their people know that, and then they focus on the bottom line. If the leader's just focused on the bottom line, the people know that, and then what happens is the people start to feel like that they're just tools or instruments, and they're not human beings. So leadership that focuses on people develop relationships, create an environment, a workplace culture that is one that people want to be a part of. That's why the best cultures always attract the best workers and keep them. And then the people never want to let the leader down because they know the leader never wants to let them down. And when that sort of relationship is created, then those people will do it. They'll move mountains to make sure that that bottom line is great. So here's what we've discovered. When leadership sees accountability as a manipulative, tactical concept, it's all about doing, then they can achieve short-term results. But that the leader that's gone beyond that really focuses on creating this high-performance workplace culture, a culture that values people, then what happens is they create this sustainable environment that ensures long-term profitability and all of our studies and all of our research, and we have very in-depth workplace culture audits that we perform, show that these enhanced workplace cultures always outperform on the bottom line over time the other organization.
So we've talked a lot about high performance and the value, and we're getting to that point about where we start talking about how organizations can foster trust and transparency. So I guess that's one part of the question. My second part to that would be, what about organizations that already find themselves outside that circle? How do they build back that trust, and how do they drive forward some of the transparency to build the accountability and the advantage there?
Great questions, Ryan. Let's start with the latter, where an organization is facing challenges because they don't have the trust of their people. And this is a challenging situation. And of course, it's a construct of a question from the standpoint is we don't know why the trust is lost or the trust is challenged. In this second, for the purpose of our conversation, the leader that says you have to earn my trust doesn't get it. It's the leader who has to earn the trust of the people, and the accountable leader understands that. So trust isn't something that is earned by the people. Trust is something that is earned by leadership. So how does leadership earn the trust of their people? Well, leadership earns the trust of their people by being trustworthy. Now, that might sound trite and obvious, but is the leader transparent? Does the leader share both their strengths and their weaknesses? Does the leader show that they are human? Does the leader expect the same of themselves, if not more, than their people? I see a lot of leaders that expect perfection from their people, which is unrealistic because I've never met a leader who is perfect. So when the leader brings the humanness into the relationship, when the leader is constantly contributing to the relationship, then what happens is trust is built. So, for example, we have what we call the terms of change based on accountability. Some organizations, we measure an organization's ability to change. We have something we call the culture audit, where we actually measure 14 things in an organizational culture and then report out on all of them. And one of the things we measure is an organization's ability to change. Now, here's the thing. Some organizations can change very easily. Some find change to be difficult. It could be the same item that's being changed. So the terms of change are this: what are we changing? How are we changing it? Why are we changing it? What are we changing? How are we changing it? Why are we changing it? Now, here's what we know to be true. Some people need to know what's being changed. That's all they need. And then they're willing to change. Some people need to know why. Why are we changing it? If you tell them why, then they're on board. They're ready for change. Now, some people just need the how. Ryan, just tell me how to do it. I'll go through a wall for you. Just tell me how to do it. And that's what they need. Then we find there's others in the organization that always question everything. They have tons of questions. They seem like roadblocks. We call them the troublemakers, but they're really not. They're just what, why, how people. They need to know the what, the why, and the how. Now, here's where trust comes in. If I have to ask you, what are we changing, or why are we changing, or how are we changing, and then you tell me, I kind of wonder, well, why didn't Ryan just share this information on the front end? What else is he holding back? So when a leader creates a consistent historical track record of communicating all of this information, people see that leader as transparent. So you're always telling me, what are we changing? Why are we changing? How are we changing? You're giving me the full story. You're giving me the information I need to process. You're putting it into my terms. You're not making it easy for you. You're focused on making it easy for me. When you do that, you create an environment of, over time, I naturally trust you. If I don't trust you, my guess is you've already done something that's going to discredit yourself. And if that's the situation, what's the driver behind that? And is it going to repeat? And is it something I have to be concerned about? So that's where trust comes into this. Trust is going to flow from an environment that inspires accountability. Accountability comes before trust. Accountability is the foundation that every leader should be building their relationship with their people on. And that's exactly what I want and will be showing everyone in our extended session exactly how to do.
So is there a foundation of communication that sort of leads to trust, do you think? Is that where it starts?
That's part of it, but it's not where it starts. So here's what happens. And I'll be going deep into this in the session. When you create this high performance culture that is sustainable, that inspires people to do their best, what happens is you get the highest form of leadership. You get enhanced communication. You get better teamwork. You get better customer satisfaction, because when people are communicating with each other and have better teamwork and they like each other, the customer has a better experience, because the customer experience can never exceed the employee experience. You create a more emotionally safe workplace. You create a workplace environment where people are innovative and open to change. They are more engaged, they're more productive, they're more profitable. All these things flow from this workplace culture. So when an organization, when we know that they're struggling with accountability, we know they're struggling with communication. We know they're struggling with teamwork. We know they're struggling with the customer experience. We know all these things are at peril. And so it flows from the culture. Communication comes from creating an environment where you want more communication rather than siloed communication. Well, I need to feel safe. Because if I don't feel safe, then what happens is, rather than communicating with you, I hold that information, because we have a meeting tomorrow. And in that meeting, I don't want to get blindsided. I need something in my back pocket that I can pull out. I need information that I can use to look good. But when the culture is created properly, people feel safe with each other because they are safe. When the leader is accountable to and for the people, then what happens is our relationships are enhanced. As you and I create a deeper, more meaningful relationship, we're going to share more openly. When we share more openly, we have better teamwork. And, well, you see how that spiral goes. So siloed communication is the number one challenge that we measure in organizations, and it's a derivative of a lack of relationship.
That's really interesting. So I think we've talked quite a bit about the benefits of retention and employee performance, but I want to be really, really clear. I think that's a main takeaway of this session that we're having right now, is how can a culture of accountability benefit a company's retention, right, and overall employee performance?
Well, we worked with an organization in the Kingdom a couple of years ago, and what we found was this. When they gave out their annual bonuses in January, the next day, guess what happened?
Guessing they had some people leave.
Exactly, because what do people do? They wait around for their annual bonus. No one's leaving the week before the bonus or the month before. They're not happy. They want to go someplace else. They wait for their bonus and they leave. We worked with this organization for a year. And at the end of the year, when they gave out their annual bonuses, no one left.
Impressive.
And the reason no one left is because the CEO, in essence, was doing what needed to be done to build the right relationships and create this this workplace culture that inspired accountability because the CEO had accepted his accountability to and for the people and built those relationships. So now what happens is all these employees that you've invested in, that you've trained, that you've educated, that you've helped them grow individually, they're staying on board. You don't have to hire new people. You don't have to train new people. You understand how that works. But it's because we've created a place that people want to be. So, you brought up a question earlier about where some of the struggles and resistance is. Well, the leader that says, well, I pay him to do that job, that leader's not going to be attracting and retaining the best people, because for him, it's transactional. If you're paying me to do a job, I can always find someone else that'll pay me more. If that's why I'm here, that's not going to work long term.
Okay, so give us 5 ways we can build an accountable culture.
Ryan, we've got like 3/4 of a day dedicated to this in Riyadh. What
Just
makes
a
you think?
Just a snapshot, Sam. Just a little taster.
You want to build a culture that inspires accountability. Well, first and foremost, the leader accepts the responsibility for that. The leader doesn't pawn this off on HR. The leader can have a team of people help them do this, but the leader has to want to be accountable to their people. But in essence, to create a high performance workplace culture, there are 5 steps. Now, it's relatively simple, but it's not necessarily easy. So first of all, you define your culture. You need to define the culture that you want. Second, you model the culture, which means the responsibility on the leader is great to be living that culture. You cannot lead the same way you cannot parent. Many times we hear parents say, do as I say, not as I do. Well, the leader has to do it. It's like, so it has to be modeled. Then the culture has to be taught. Not only does the culture have to be taught at all levels of the organization, but the concept of culture has to be taught. So that conversation in the hallway should always be, well, our culture, fill in the blank. In our culture, this is how we fill in the blank. So people understand that culture is important. The next thing is, so you design it, you design the culture, you model it, you teach it, you protect it, and there's specific ways to protect the culture that we'll go through, and you celebrate it. And these 5 steps then repeat themselves. You're constantly refining the design of what the culture is. You're making sure that it's being modeled, that it's being taught and protected at all levels of the organization. And then you're constantly celebrating the success that your culture is achieving. Now, that may seem a little simple on the surface, but when we get into it, there's a tremendous depth that we're going to discuss. Now, the one thing it doesn't talk about, and this is important, is it's critical that we measure the culture. We need to measure the culture. So we have to measure where we are now, and then we design a culture that's going to get us to where we want to go. And then in a year, we measure again, we look at our progress, and then we fine-tune what we need to fine-tune so that over time, we're creating this high-performance culture. And I believe that that's what's really helped us be so successful, is our ability to measure and fully understand exactly where that culture is in the moment. And now, here's the thing. In our session in Riyadh, we're actually going to use our culture audit, and everyone in the room is going to participate and experience what it's like to measure their culture. And in that moment, we're going to generate an executive report, 125-page executive report that analyzes the combined culture of everyone in the room. So we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're not just talking theory. We're going to show everyone how to do it. And we want people to leave this session equipped to be able to look at their culture and make the changes they need to hit the goals. If they want to get to where they need to be by 2030, then it's going to come back to the workplace culture.
So given the enormous economic expansion that we're seeing in Saudi right now, why would you say that accountability is probably more important now than it ever has been before?
Accountability is the highest form of leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership at the highest level in the kingdom, or leadership in an organization, a business, or even leadership in a family. And so if we can improve leadership at all levels through a deeper, more meaningful understanding of what accountability truly is and can be, then what's going to happen is we're going to create better families, communities, businesses, and ultimately the kingdom will flourish at a higher level because everyone will be contributing at a higher level.
That's brilliant. So Sam, thank you very much. We are just about out of time, but for those of you that have enjoyed the last 20 minutes or so, as I said, this is just really a scratch of the surface. And Sam will be with us in Riyadh on the 26th of May to deliver a much more in-depth program on Accountability Advantage and how we can build a sustainable high-performance workplace culture at HRC KSA. So thank you again, Sam. And of course, to those of you who have joined us today, we do look forward to seeing some of you in Riyadh in May to learn even more about the Accountability Advantage. So thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Sam Silverstein, and I am very excited to be back in the kingdom on May 26th for a master class at the HRSC HR Summit. We have an outstanding day planned for you. If you are a senior HR executive, you need to be at this event. And my suggestion would be that you bring any and every other senior executive from your team that you can, because when you leave, I want you to leave with a specific plan on how to create a high-performance workplace culture that creates better organizations, better people, and better communities. We're going to go deep into accountability, the fallacy of the way people think about accountability now and how accountability can be turned into your competitive advantage. We're going to talk about the different types of commitment, tactical versus relational, and we're going to go deep into a 5-step system on how to create a high-performance workplace culture that prioritizes accountability and inspires people to choose to be their best. So I want you to join me on May 26th for the master class, The Accountability Advantage, and I look forward to seeing you there.
What if you and your team can be even more? Even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more. Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.
Hello, this is Omnia. I'm the editor of the Etcher Observer. Joining me today, Milmo Banji. He does have a very interesting business, which is a social first creative agency that helps people find jobs, but through social media. And one of the mission of his agency is actually to prepare 100 million young individuals for the workforce. So welcome, and it's a pleasure speaking with you over the internet.
No, a real pleasure to be here.
Um,
Thank you so much for inviting me, Omnia.
Feels very weird. I was going through your synopsis and I was like, I read one line that just struck me and it said, Generation Z is the first true digital native, and I'm a millennial. And I remember in the 1990s, we were so excited for the internet in 1996. So
Yeah.
it's hurt me. However, I do want to understand from your perspective, what exactly is this generation facing when it comes to finding jobs and being part of the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we look at Generation Z, they are truly digital natives. And what I mean by that, these are young people who spend most of their time on social media. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. I myself, I'm 27, so you can call me a centennial Gen Z. So it's just a fancy way of saying if I was born a year earlier, I'd be a millennial, but I always take it. But we spend all of our time on social media. And some of the qualities that really define us is how we look at the future of work, what we value when it comes to work, things like, hybrid work, really important for us, a blend of that in office and remote working to cater to our desires for flexibility and autonomy at work. Things like being able to use AI and technologies for collaboration. It's become a really important part of our lives in the workplace. It's like I now have friends, who are Gen Z who will apply to jobs using artificial intelligence. They'll write their CV with artificial intelligence and they'll actually go into interviews and have an AI assistant next to them just to aid them in how they answer the questions. So it's like, how do companies begin to prepare for a workplace where you have these young people who care about how hybrid work, who care about technology in the workplace, who care about sustainability and sustainable work practices. What do companies need to be doing to ensure that they can cater themselves to this new breed of young people who are going to be entering the workplace? So just some of the things to really think about as an organization when you're looking to attract and engage Gen Z to the workplace.
Someone would say they're spoiled. They have AI to help them to do the interviews. But seriously, some people would actually argue this is actually there's a question of ethics, but also there is a question of how you can't communicate as a human being. So how could you actually work with other human beings? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one for us because when we look at the workplace, it is the first time that we've had 5 generations in the workplace. Everything from baby boomers all the way through to kind of Generation Z. These are 5 different generations all in one workplace. And that presents a multitude of different challenges for organizations, for businesses and employers. And the bigger picture here is like, how do you ensure there is that constant communication, there is collaboration? One person was born in the 60s and they have a completely different perspective and way of working. And on the other end, you've got Gen Z who have a completely different way of working, who view the world very differently, who have different expectations of the workplace. And yeah, a lot of people do call them lazy. People call Gen Z lazy. They're seen to be expectant of different things. They're seen to be individuals who, will pull a tantrum at work, and it's not uncommon to see people quiet quitting. I don't know if you've come across the term quiet quitting, but it's this term where Gen Z will go into work and they won't quit, but they'll just start doing a lot less. They'll take their time to complete their tasks. They'll spend a bit longer on work and slowly quit. But eventually you might just get an email from them 6 months in with them saying, I quit. And you're thinking, but we love you. We've done everything we can do to support you and to make sure this work is conducive for you. And there'll be no explanation. And you as an employer has kind of scratched your head thinking, what have we done wrong here? So it's almost thinking in the workplace, how do you ensure the intergenerational collaboration when you've got 5 different generations all in a single
Right.
workforce?
How about bridging the gap between them? Maybe using technology to actually engage different generations together? Is that an option? Or that's the only option, actually?
It's an interesting one, because with technologies like artificial intelligence in the workplace, there are opportunities, but there are also kind of risks to using things like artificial intelligence. We've seen it, I think I've mentioned with, CVs and getting into the workplace, but also we know that 86% of Gen Z really care about things like training and development. See a massive opportunity there, where employers or organizations can utilize AI to train and develop young people when they come into the workplace. That's a massive opportunity. A lot of young people also cite the fact that, one of the biggest reasons that Gen Z leave the workplace is because, their managers never have time to train and develop them. They'll leave because their managers will cite themselves being too busy. I'm too busy. I've got a lot on my plate. So their development is stunted. That's where technology and things like artificial intelligence can really come into play to offer Gen Z a structured system where they can, grow and develop. Where AI really comes short is things like mentorship, which is another important factor. I think 75% of Generation Z cite the importance of mentorship as a function of them growing and developing. That's an area where AI can't help.
Right.
It's mentorship is very much a structured system. It works very well when it's structured, number one. But number two, you learn by observing an individuals that have been in that position, have made mistakes, have learned, and they can pass that information over to you. That's where the real value is. So in some areas, from a training development perspective, yes, artificial intelligence can bridge the gap. But on the other side, when we look at things like mentorship, it becomes very difficult to bridge that gap between AI and Gen Z development.
When we talk about Gen Z, I sometimes feel that we're talking as if that's 50,000 people. All of them look the same. All of them behave the same. All of them walk the same. They live in the same area. But we're talking about generation that is spread around across the world, and not all of them are behaving in a similar manner. Now, the question is, how can a company actually deal with a new generation that it comes from different within itself? There are different backgrounds. How can a company deal with that?
Yeah, so I think first to your initial point, I fully agree. I think people have this misconception that Gen Z is a handful of people and they're a single homogenous group and they all act and think exactly the same way. The truth could not be further from the truth. We do see nuances in Generation Z from all across the world. Your Gen Z in the Middle East, a different Gen Z in North America and Gen Z in Europe. There are differences. There are also similarities. That's the first thing to be said. The other thing to be said as well is there's a misconception that Gen Z are young. They're like under 21. They're maybe, 16 to 21. Truth of the matter is Gen Z are aged between their birth years are between 1996 and 2012, which means at the age of 27, you're still Gen Z. Mm-hmm. So people who have gone past the early talent stage of their work and are now in those mid to senior positions are still also Gen Z. We're seeing middle managers who actually are described as Generation Z in the workplace. So when we think about what companies should be doing, when we think about what companies can do to ensure that they're able to cater for the different types of Generation Zs in the workplace, again, it's looking at how do you foster collaboration across generations? How do you introduce things like bringing in we've seen this work really well with a few organizations where they've brought in a Gen Z consultant. I bet you're asking, what's a Gen Z consultant? This is somebody that comes into a business. They're paid for by the business, and their responsibility or their role is to ensure that Gen Z are looked after in the workplace. They engage really well. They're given adequate training. They're able to build community and also learn and teach what they're learning to other generations in the workplace. We've seen this done really, really well by a company called Dentsu. Dentsu is a really, really massive agency. They're a global agency. They've managed to do that really well. And they've actually seen Gen Z retention go up by 9%, which is extraordinary, right?
Mhm. Yes, it is. But at the same time, I don't know. I still feel something is uneasy here. Something is really not clicking. Um, let's talk about the 100 million young people you want to find a job for. Maybe we'll take it from that perspective.
Yeah.
How are you going to find them jobs?
I don't know.
Don't make promises. Don't make promises.
That's the question I keep asking myself. No, it's a massive challenge. And I'll really be honest with you, there's something that really drives us, which is big, hairy, audacious goals. We're conscious that in the UK alone, or in Europe, or in the world, there's more than 100 million Gen Zs. The population of the UK on its own is about 65 million. So of course, we're not going to be able to achieve our goal in just the UK. The vision for us here is to be global. We want to be a global organization supporting a multitude of Gen Zs and young people who are based in North America or based in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. And our focus is to leverage technology and to also leverage social media as the channel or the conduit to actually support these 100 million young people. What we found is things like TikTok, things like social media at the moment are taking over. If you look at what happened last year with TikTok, they've got there were more searches on TikTok than there were on Google last year. And a lot of that search volume, 67% of that search volume, is driven by these young people. So for us, it makes it really clear that for us to reach these 100 million young people, we need to be leveraging, number one, social media, but number two, technology. And it's beautiful that things like AI are starting to really shift the social landscape and the world of work. But at the same time, social media is also massively exploded to the point at which anyone can be a TikTok star. You can jump on Omnia, you can jump on TikTok, do a couple of videos and go viral. And before you know it, you're like, do you know what? I'm quitting my job now. I'm just going to do this full time.
When you were talking now, I was thinking about a friend who was telling me, if you want to make more money, just go dance on TikTok. And then maybe I'll leave my job. But it's just very interesting. It sounds like a lot, to be honest. There is a lot going on. We spoke about integrating Generation Z into the workplace, finding them jobs, leveraging digital tools or technological tools, better words, to enhance their capabilities. It seems like a lot going on. That is overwhelming in itself. I can imagine an HR manager sitting down in their office and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? I should have been a doctor. But that's a lot. So how do you think firms should go around with this? What would you advise in terms of a talent management strategy to make sure that, yes, I'm bringing all this in and handling things at the same time?
Yeah, a very good question. I think the answer to that question actually starts with, you mentioned it in your question. It's actually building a strategy, so thinking through everything from how do we understand this generation and what do we understand about this generation? First and foremost, that could look like research, that could look like insights. Could you do some research to understand perceptions that Gen Z have of you as an employer? Could you do some internal research to understand the current experiences of Gen Z in your business and use the insights and the data that you pertain from that research to begin building a strategy? And that strategy needs to be all encompassing. It needs to cover everything from attraction all the way through to retention. you know, and from an attraction perspective is thinking, right, how are we going to reach these young people? What channels are we going to be using? Are we going to be on LinkedIn? Are we going to be using job boards? The data suggests that no, it's not going to be LinkedIn. It's not going to be job boards. You know, the data suggests that 80% of these young people are spending their time on social media. So yeah, you're going to need to have social media as part of your strategy. You know, we're also seeing things like influencers be a massive or play a massive part in the attraction phase. You know, how do you leverage those? So looking at data first and insights, then thinking, how does attraction look like? How does the recruitment process look like? How are you bringing people on board? How does the application process look like? How do your assessments look like? How does onboarding look like? And then building the strategy for that. Then you're then thinking about retention. How do we keep these young people within the business? How do we ensure that they're able to stay here longer than 6 months, longer than 1 year? And what does that internal retention strategy look like? So it's an overarching strategy which begins with research and works its way through all the way through to retention.
What about security? Because as you said, 80% are actually spending their time on social media, and there has been questions over social media, etc., when it comes to security. How can it's not the company's problems, but let's say company X is actually hiring through social media, and I decided to use companies X to hire for something completely different, but I'm using the reputation and the name. That kind of opens companies to much more of a bigger headache, right?
Yeah, and that's where companies have brand teams. You know, that's where companies really invest in their kind of employer brand teams. And we've seen it. I think every large organization that has anywhere between 100 plus employees will have a brand team. And their focus is thinking about risk. It's thinking about contingency plans. It's thinking about, you know, what's the risk appetite for us as a brand to engage in social media. We see 98, 99% of employers. We've only come across maybe 2 in the last year. Employers that have said, hey, we just don't do social media. We don't want to be on social. We want to be a quiet brand. But the majority of brands want to be on social. The appetite is there. And they have the internal infrastructure and teams to ensure that, you know, there is enough of an opportunity and less risk when they engage on social.
Right. I just want to ask you one final question, which is, what do you think is the most appealing component for generation? I mean, again, we can't generalize, but from those who you have met and dealt with and was able to allocate into companies, what do you think is the most important component that makes them realize, oh yes, I want to work for this company, other than, of course, the fairness and the equity and all that stuff? What other than that?
Good question.
Sorry.
How do you boil this down into a single element? For me, here's what I would say, right? A company's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is number one. We've seen this in 2 places. Number one, the data suggests that. But number 2, we've conducted a separate study where we just spoke to diverse talent. In fact, we've built the UK's largest and most comprehensive study on Black Gen Z. And what came out was, number 1 was a company's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What that means is, before Gen Z apply to work for you, they're looking at your website, they're looking at your social media, they're looking at all your channels to see how diverse you are. They're looking at and seeing what the commitment you have or you've made towards diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like. And if that ticks all their boxes, then the challenge is, are you living everything you've shown on your website, on your social media, on your job boards? Are you living that? Is that diversity reflected when they join? And that's the biggest factor for me, I would say, to Gen Z applying and joining companies.
Lovely. It was a great pleasure speaking with you, and I definitely look forward to talking to you more at HRS EKSA. Thank you very much for your time.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Omia, and I'm looking forward to speaking in a couple of months. Hello, everyone. My name is Milimo Banji. I am the founder and CEO of TapIn. We are a social media organization that helps companies attract, engage, and hire Gen Z talent. And I will be speaking at the conference in May. I'm really, really excited to share all the insights on what you as employers can be doing to attract, engage, and retain Gen Z talent.
Hi, I'm Giorgio Davidoni, and I'm here today with you in order to give you a little bit some insights about the workshop on how to pressure test talent pipeline that we will have with InfoConnect in Riyadh, May 29. So in a couple of months, we will be there. So what we want to discuss is, first of all, what is my experience? How I can help you during this workshop. I have worked 30 years in multinational companies in 4 different continents. I have worked in Europe, around Europe. I have worked into the USA, both in corporate and the affiliate. And then I worked in China, covering the Chinese market. And then in Dubai, covering 71 countries. And so as you can see, I think a good experience with different culture, different people. But, as usual, when we speak about people and human resources, human beings are always the same. What I have learned is that there is something that is very simple that you need to tweak due to the culture of the different region. But, human beings are human beings, as I say. So this is about me. And what about the program? The program, first of all, we will discuss about why we need to do succession management, why we need to pressure test a talent pipeline. And for this, we will start with this. I say, George, what is this? What are you sharing with us? These are the pills that I take every morning for my hypertension. So, Giorgio, what has this to do with talent pipeline? I tell you something. In the 50s and in the 60s, was the economic boom that followed the Second World War. And in that period, the mortality rate of senior managers in big corporations in America reached up to 30%, 30. Wow, what was going on? I tell you, 80% of the time was due to cardiac problem. So it was a big problem because the economy was growing, the business was expanding, but you lose a lot of your senior manager. And so two things happened into the 60s. Companies, pharmaceutical companies, start to work on medicine treatment for heart problem, hypertension. Second, the companies start to realize the importance of succession management. And so the companies start to build, and this is where all the tools that we use today basically were start to be built and used into the major corporation. Second reason why we need to do succession management and to have a strong talent pipeline is because also a recent study from Harvard Business School, they demonstrate that basically when you hire an external CEO, for example, 85% is the turnover is 85% higher compared to internal developed people. By the way, when you hire an external CEO, usually in average, you pay this person 15%, 1/5 more than an internal developed candidate. So high turnover, more expensive. And by the way, the only 2.8% of external hire CEO have more than 90% of probability to be successful. Wow. So high turnover, very low probability to be more successful than an internal hire and more expensive. So I think that these are good examples and we will go deeper during the workshop on this to understand why we need to have a succession management. When we have a succession management, we have a talent pipeline. And so this workshop will look pressure test the talent pipeline, because you can tell me, oh, Giorgio, I have a talent pipeline of 100 people, 200 people, but are these the right people? Do you really have a solid talent pipeline? Or in the moment of truth, you will not have the right person for the right job. So the other things that we are going to look into the workshop is what do we need to pressure test? What we need to look at to pressure test into the talent pipeline? So, and the first thing we will discuss about, talent identification and all the different tools that are available to recognize if someone has an upper potential. And so psychometric, gamification, 360 feedback. We will go through all these tools and discuss the pro and cons of every tool or technique. The other things that we will discuss also is, okay, which position? I have 100 positions in my company. Do I need to have a talent pipeline for each position? So we will discuss and learn also with practical exercise, what is the difference between key position and the critical position. So we will identify what are really the position where we need to be sure that we have a backup, that we have people in line in this pipeline. And by the way, we will also discuss how many people, what is the right number? If I have 10 positions, how many candidates do I need to have in terms of potential behind every position? And also we will look where I need to look for this candidate. In my office, in another office. So this will be very important. Which position do we need to have a talent pipeline? And also for what kind of position, as I say, and how many talents we need to have and where we need to look for this talent. Then we will do, okay, now I understand the importance to have a succession management pipeline. I understand what, I need to assess, what I need to pressure test. And then the third important thing is, okay, Giorgio, now how I do it practically, tell me, what is your experience? What have you learned? And here there are a few things that we will work together also with practical exercise and example based on other company that I have learned and my personal experience. So the first thing is to look, okay, high potential and high performer. So this is sometimes because, this is a top performer, so he or she can move at the next level. Unfortunately, it's not true. What has been demonstrated that only 30% of high performers are high potential. So we will discuss about this and we will discuss how to identify the two. And when we have identified how we manage that 30%, the high performer, high potential, to help them to grow. And by the way, how to ensure that we don't disengage the 70% remaining high performers that do not have an upper potential, because these are the pillars, of the companies. So it's important to understand how to identify and then how to develop and engage all the population that we have there among our high performers. Other thing that we will do is then we will work with a tool that is called 9-box grid that is back from the 70s. And with this tool, we will look at potential axis and performance axis, and we'll say, okay, this is a mid performer, for example, with a high potential. So it's someone that probably is, in terms of potential, he or she, we think that they can do better in terms of position growing, but they need to improve the performance, of course. Okay, how we will do this? How we will support these people? And so we will identify in this 9-box the different kind of employees based, as I say, on the performance and on the potential, and not only the identification, but what kind of intervention are recommended for each position. And then we will look also at a couple of practical assessment tools that I have personally experienced and learned during my career. Also simple question to say, does this person have a potential? Because as I say, there are a lot of sophisticated tools, but also, good common sense sometimes we can use this. And second, a tool that I have developed with my peers also is that, okay, in the moment that we have 10 talents and I have a potential opening, how I have a more objective discussion and assessing the people that have the right skills, because they are all potential, but for this position specifically. So I will provide you a very simple tool as an Excel that will help you to have objective discussion among the talents that you have and the position that they can aspire to cover. Then we will look also at something that is important, very important, that is called unconscious bias. We are human beings. And, sometimes there is something back here that when we do a recruiting, when we do a talent assessment, can put us in a position where we overestimate or underestimate some people due to unconscious bias. So we will discuss about what are the unconscious bias, identify them, and also what we can do to prevent them during our talent discussion. And then we will look at interesting study from the 60s from MIT that is called Pygmalion effect. And this will be something that, if you don't know it, will blow your mind about some studies that are done by the psychology team in MIT into the 60s that can show us how unconscious bias can really drive us off the road when we talk about the talent. So all these things, as I say, why we need to do a succession management, what to pressure test in your talent pipeline, how to pressure test your talent pipeline, and then looking at the unconscious bias will help us during this workshop to work on how really to ensure that we have as much as possible a solid talent pipeline. By the way, one important thing, guys, I do not have a crystal ball, and I will not be able to provide you a crystal ball. This is not magic. What we will do together, my goal is to equip you with tool, process, system, and based also on my experience, some little tricks to reduce as much as possible the margin of error to ensure that in your company, when you look at your talent pipeline, it's very solid and very reliable. So look forward to see you May 29 in Riyadh. Ciao.
I'm Giorgio Davidoni, and on May 29, I will be in Riyadh at the HRSE conference. I will have a workshop on pressure testing talent pipeline, and I hope you will join this workshop. Why? What will you learn? First, you will learn why we need to pressure test the talent pipeline. Second, what we need to pressure test into the talent pipeline. All the position, or we look at critical position, key position. The third thing is how to pressure test a talent pipeline. I will not have and share with you a crystal ball. I don't have it. No one have it. But in my 30 years of experience in HR across Europe, United States, and Asia, and into the Middle East, I have learned how to apply things and little tricks, how to tweak, tools that we all know. And so based on my experience, I'm going to share and practice with you what I have learned to be sure that we will reduce the margin on error. And also we will look at unconscious bias that can drive some wrong evaluation. So I look forward to see you in Riyadh, the 29th of May, at the workshop on how to pressure test your company talent pipeline. Ciao.